Hi guys, welcome back. So this is our last segment for the show. We are going to now specifically talk about compound growth in the context of finance. Remember, the first context we looked at was the society. We looked at if we were to graph it, what will happen. We looked at if we were to then have data, what will happen. Specifically now we're going to look at if I have data and I need to graph it, but under finance, and I also need to do some calculations also under finance. What exactly will happen there? So that's what we're really going to be looking at. So let's just jump right into it. So as you see here, remember that our big idea is still the concept of growth. We're looking at a pattern specifically under society. Now we're looking at a pattern under finance there. Now, key words for under finance would be the term or length of time. We normally represent this using the letter N, so please note that. We have the principal amount. The principal amount, we normally represent this using P. The accumulated amount, as you can see, the A there, we normally use A for this. The interest rate, which is normally either I or R, so we will say this would be I in this instance. And then the period of compounding. The period of compounding will be how often do you get your interest. So for example, let's say you've opened up an investment account, right? And you are saving 500 rands every month. How much you get as the interest rate, let's say, is 12% per annum. Per annum would mean we're talking about at the end of the year, right? How that interest is given to you each in that particular year is what compounding period means. Meaning, if I say to you it's compounded monthly, it means I'm giving you 1% every month, because per annum it's supposed to be 12%. If I say it's compounded quarterly, it means every quarter, and we have 4 quarters in a year, so it means I must give you what? 3% every quarter or every 3 months, because at the end of the year it must amount to 12%. So that's what compounding period is about. It's about how often you get the interest within a duration of a year, and then multiply it by however many years that you are dealing with. Now, in terms of mathematics, now the formula or the equation for this will look something like this. A is equals to P, open bracket, 1 plus I, all to the exponent of n. Remember that our A will be the accumulated amount, so what you get after a certain period of time. Our P will be the principal amount, what you started with. So this will normally be if you are investing a lump sum for a long duration, right? So not you making monthly contributions. No, it's like saying I have 10,000, I just want to leave it there for 10 years. That's what the principal amount would be. And then I will be the interest that you normally get. So we normally divide I by 100, because we don't normally use percentages when we're dealing with calculators or with calculations. Now, our keywords would be the period of compounding, guys. Remember that I said it would either be per annum, which they normally show it as PA. This means you get interest every year. So if you have 10,000 and you are saving that 10,000 for 10 years, and they're giving you 12% per annum, it means you are getting 12% of the 10,000 at the end of every year, right? But you're going to get 12% of 10,000 for the first year. For the second year, you will get 12% of the 10,000 plus the 12% of the previous month. So that's what you will then use there. And then continuing like that. So it will be, I will just say A, the meaning for the previous month that we have. Semi-annually, semi would mean every 6 months, because it's semi-annual, right? Remember, semi means half. So half yearly. every 6 months in a year, we give you 6%. If it was 12% per annum, compounded semi-annually, it would mean that the 12% is divided into 2 in a year. So I give you 6% at the end of June, I give you 6% at the end of December, but in a year you would have got 12%. And then we also have compounded quarterly, which I just explained now, but compounded quarterly, just remember as well, has to do with how many quarters I have in a year, and I'm getting interest every 3 months, right, in a year. So that means I have 4 quarters in a year. So at the end of March, at the end of June, at the end of September, and then December, like that. So that will be what we are talking about. And then lastly, I have compounded monthly. Monthly, as you can see, is quite straightforward. If it's 12%, I'm giving you 1% every month. But at the end of the year, when I add that, it must amount to 12%. Now, another concept that has to do with keywords would be our interest rate. There's nominal and effective interest rate. Né? So let me just quickly explain this. Then we'll do an example. Nominal interest rate will be what you are given for the whole year, right? So if they say to you, we're giving you 12% per annum, that's the nominal interest rate. But if I then say 12% per annum compounded monthly, the compounded monthly, if you take it into consideration, then it is now an effective interest rate, right? Which normally the effective interest rate is slightly more than the nominal interest rate. So the effective interest rate is what you get when you take into consideration the compounding period, and the nominal interest rate will be what you get just at the end of the year, right? So that's what we're talking about. So for example, if we're talking about that 12% of hours that I was just using now per annum, right? This means that this would be my nominal interest rate. But now, if I use 12% per annum compounded monthly now, compounded monthly, which I will say is that, it means I'm going to get 1%, right, each and every month. But remember that the growth under compound is normally an exponential growth. So meaning the 1% here will be for maybe, let's say, 10 rands. But the 1% here, it will not be for 10 rands only. It will be for 10 rands plus the 1% of the initial amount that you got. When you get here, it will be 1% of the past 2 months accumulated amount. It will be 1% of the past 3 months accumulated amount, 1% of the past 4 months accumulated amount. So what does that mean? It means at the end of the year, it will no longer be roughly 12%. It will be maybe 12.25% that you actually got. That's why if you go for an investment or anything like that, the big thing that you need to know, guys, is we deal with compound interest and nothing else. Because simple interest, as we saw with the simple growth, it's when you calculate for the original amount that you had in the bank. So if I say 10% of 100 rands, that's 10 rands, meaning every year I'm just adding 10 rands in your bank. But if it's compound interest, it's going to be 10% of what you have in the bank at that time. So for the first year, it will be 10% of 100 rand, which is 10 rands, right? So that's 100 rand plus 10 rand. For the second year, it's going to be 10% of 110 rands. Third year, 10% of whatever that I have at the end of two years. So that's why the compound interest or the compound growth is quite a very big concept and a very important concept if you want, or if you're looking at investing or saving money or anything like that. But let's look at an actual example and see how we can apply this. Now, Sibongile wants to invest 500 rand in a fixed deposit account for 5 years, right? Fixed deposit account, what does that mean? It means this is actually considered a lump sum, right? This is a lump sum. So this person only just takes the 500 rand, they throw it in the bank and they leave it there. And they leave it for a duration of 5 years. The bank says, we are going to offer you, or to pay her rather, an interest rate of 12.5% per annum, right? Per annum is when we considering nominal interest rate. As soon as we then continue and say, okay, how is this compounded quarterly, then we're now talking about an effective interest rate. So what would this mean? If I want to know how much money she will have after 5 years, firstly, the big idea here will be, what is the interest that the person is getting from the bank? Number two, what was the principal amount? How much did they invest in the bank? Sibongile invested 500 rand in a fixed deposit account, right? How long was the investment for? It was for 5 years. How was it compounded? It was compounded quarterly. So meaning the 12.5% is actually going to be divided by 4, because I have 4 quarters in a year. So they will be getting a quarter of 12.5 at the end of every 3 months for the duration of their investment. But at the end of the year, it must all amount to 12.5. I will always emphasize, at the end of the year, please don't make the mistake of thinking that 12.5 compounded quarterly means the person is getting 12.5 every quarter. No. The 12.5 is what they get at the end of the year. But compounded quarterly means they get a quarter of that every 3 months in that particular duration. When you add it, it must amount to the 12.5%. Now, if we just maybe look at the calculations for this, right? So it will be roughly, I have 12.5, and I will divide this by 4, which will then give me roughly that amount that I have there, right? So, and you know that this will roughly be 4, something, right? So that is what they will get every month. So they will be getting an amount, a percentage of 4, a certain decimal there, percent at the end of every 3 months for the duration of the investment that they have, which will be the 5 years. Because at the end, when I add it, it must actually give me, the 12.5%. So if I wanted to calculate this, my formula would be A, which is the accumulated amount, is equals to P, which is the principal amount, 1 plus I to the exponent of N. And then my P, remember, will be the 500, and this will be into 1 plus, remember we said interest, we don't use it as percent, but we use it as a decimal fraction, meaning it's going to be 0.125, but this is divided into 4 months, or rather 4 quarters, right? To the exponent of now 5 years, it means in every year. Now let's understand the duration of the investment. The duration is 5 years. But for the first year, think about this. How many times did this Sibongile get the interest? Sibongile got interest 4 times in the first year. They got interest 4 times in the second year. So in 2 years, they got interest how many times? 8 times now. In the third year, they got it 4 times. So after 3 years, they got it how many times? 12 times. Like that. So what does this mean? The compounding period, you will then multiply it by the number of years, because in every year, they are getting the interest 4 times. So in 5 years, they actually got the interest 20 times. And that's how you will then find what the N is, which is the exponent there. And that's how you will then look at what is it that you will need to do. So it means instead of just saying 5 there, I will say 5 multiplied by 4. So in simple terms, I am saying to you, when you look at our compounding period, which maybe I will just call CP, we are saying that the I will be divided by the compounding period, right? And the N will be multiplied by the compounding period. So, for example, if it is compounded monthly, this would mean that the I will be divided by 12, and then the N will be multiplied by 12. What does this mean? If the person opened the investment and they left it for 3 years, in each year they're getting interest 12 times. So in the 3 years, it would mean they actually got the interest 36 times. And then the I was divided by 12 because per annum, yes, they might be getting maybe 8%, but you will need to split that into 12 months by dividing it by 12. Hence, that's what the big idea here is. For the compounding period, you divide the I by the compounding period, you multiply the N by the compounding period. Now, to just do this calculation, this is what I will then have here. So, if I want to calculate this, it will be 500, and then I will open a bracket there. It will be 1 plus, remember 0,125, and this is divided by, or let me just use 125 divided by 4 because it's compounded quarterly, and then this will be to the exponent of 5 multiplied by the 4, and this will give me that amount there. So that will be the total amount that Sibongile will have at the end of 5 years. So you can see that if maybe Sibongile was to leave this investment for roughly, let's say, 10 years, then it might be quite a larger amount of that as opposed to what this is. So maybe let's look at what is it that I mean there. So if maybe they left this for, let's say, 10 years, you see, now it's 1,700, right? It actually is slightly less than double that. But if they leave it now for maybe 15 years, you can see that it's 3,000. It's way more than double that, right? So you can really see that what is it that we are trying to talk about here, that the longer the period that you are saving your money, the more money you are actually going to get, or the more advantage you're going to take of the compounding period. Now, just to recap on what we just spoke about, our big idea was growth. We spoke about patterns, and then under society we spoke about that that working exercise that we looked at, and then under the finance context we also looked at compounding periods, we looked at the interest. So a quick summary of this is compound growth would be an exponential growth. So exponential growth meaning it is not growing at the same rate, right? It is growing at an exponential level, right? So meaning every month, the amount that you get, if it's an investment, is actually way more than the amount you got in the previous month, right? I made an example with saving maybe 100 rands and you're getting 10% of that, which is 10 rands. In the second year, you're not gonna get 10 rands. You're gonna get more than 10 rands, because then 10% of 110 is slightly more than 10 rands. You see, so meaning every time you're getting a slightly higher amount, hence it's an exponential growth. The last point is that time is the biggest factor. I can't stress this enough. With compound period and compound growth, there is no way that time will not be in your advantage. Time is always the biggest advantage that you need to take when it comes to investing under a compound growth. And that's all that we needed to look at. So guys, from me to you, bye. I will see you next time.